MeMonster.
Chapter 246. The catastrophe, with the official name Monster 2 but nicknamed the New Human by humanity, quickly traversed the South American continent. In the process, the number of hunters who lost their lives to it exceeded thousands, while civilian casualty was simply beyond the scope of anyone's imagination. Orlando, Florida, USA. This largest theme park on Earth was always crowded with people 365 days a year, but now, except for one creature, no one else existed. That one creature was, of course, Monster 2. It stared blankly without even knowing its own purpose. However, Monster 2, who was just about to head somewhere, raised its head when it heard a sound from somewhere. Next news, another league's guildmaster, U.C. Autumn, announced that he would go to hunt Monster 2. People's expectations are growing, knowing that he will work together with the Murim Lord, Seol Yungyeon. The subjugation of Monster 2 really possible? Possible, if I must say. After all, Murim Lord is an SSS-rank superhuman. Monster 2 tilted its head at what was displayed on the screen attached to a tall building. It was because the face of that man in the news felt familiar to it. And a few seconds later, a memory rushed towards its head. It was a memory which reminded it of its reason for being born. U.C. Autumn. His goal was over there on the screen. Monster 2 pointed at it with its finger and the screen went off after letting out a small spark. However, Monster 2 knew it wasn't the real U.C. Autumn. I have to find the real one. Monster 2 turned its head. By now, it had already become used to the sound of the explosion it heard just now. It was the sound made by the lower race called humans to express their hostility toward itself. What the freaking, the bullet was blocked by a sign that was blown by the wind. The person who fired the special sniper rifle was a 9-year F-rank hunter, a veteran who had survived countless live and death battles. Therefore, any wind or whatever which could become a hindrance to him was something he had already calculated. However, just now, a sign was blown by the wind and deflected the bullet coincidentally. Thanks to that, without being able to injure the creature, his location was discovered. Damn, I have to run. When he failed to snipe Monster 2, the hunter jumped from a high-rise building with a wire attached to his body, leaving behind all of his other items. However, the wind started to blow wildly at that moment. What is this? It was literally a natural phenomenon. An ordinary natural phenomenon in which not even a shred of energy was detected. But why now? Due to the natural phenomenon, the hunter failed to shoot the monster before, and now his body was rocked back and forth by the wind, and eventually the wire attached to his body snapped, making him fall to the ground. Although he was a 9-year-old veteran hunter, he did not have any superpower, and so, by falling, he lost his life. Without batting an eyelash, Monster 2 turned his head back indifferently. There was another screen floating in the direction where it was looking. This evening, Hunter U.C. Autumn will hold a press conference in Beijing, China. Beijing, China. For Monster 2, that information was more than enough. It doesn't matter where on Earth it was or what country it was. If it could know where it was, it could go there right away. Monster 2 disappeared from the spot. There was still no way to know where the creature called Monster 2 was moving towards. However, there was a calculation based on the route it traveled across South America that it would have reached Africa within a day at the earliest. Noonim, tomorrow we will go to Africa. After saying that to Noonim, I held a press conference in Beijing. To be honest, I didn't really want to do it, but the Chinese government politely asked if I could give their citizens peace of mind, so I had no choice but to do it. It's funny to think there are still people thinking about politics even in the midst of this trying time. Haha, it's not like that. Actually, what I said was right. China was not trying to reassure its citizens. If they simply wanted to do that, there would be no way that there would be politicians in suits sitting next to me. Perhaps the purpose they followed by holding this press conference was to promote extensively, saying we can control Hunter U.C. Autumn. Originally, I didn't want to do all this, but since I didn't have a choice, I am just going to leave after telling these people about my belief. I am not protecting China, I am protecting the world. The boundary between the two was almost invisible, but Yekaterina thought it would be pretty good if I spoke those words at an official place. The meaning of the statement would be, it's not like I am not going to protect China, but at the same time, it's not like I am only protecting China. In other words, once I said those words, I would be able to counter the political ploy cooked by the Chinese politicians. Take it easy, all the necessary preparations for the hunt have been completed, all that remains is to wait, Newnham said to me as she smiled. Right, not only that, evacuation orders in the western part of the African continent had also been issued. Truly, the only thing left for me was to wait. As I proudly walked to the press conference room, reporters of various nationalities bombarded me with their cameras. It felt like a thunderbolt was hitting the ground right in front of me. I tried my best to ignore all the flash and walked out at a leisurely pace to shake hands with those who had come in advance before approaching the podium and grabbed the microphone. Wait, Newnham grabbed my shoulder and stopped me. Her expression was cold as usual, but this time, if I must say, it was colder than ever. Before I could even finish uttering my question, an ominous feeling swept over me. What happened next was purely instinctive on my part. I yelled, "Everyone run away," and hurriedly took the gear out of my inventory. However, I don't know what I was taking out. My ears rung as my body flies and destroys several walls. My back was impacted by the shock, my vision was flashing, and I couldn't hear anything but the ringing. It was only when I slammed to the ground did I realize that I had been beaten by something. Kuhuk, a handful of blood comes out with the cough. Meanwhile, Tosca sparks erupted in the area around my abdomen. Battery level 0%. With just a single impact, the barrier of the first-class ether suit was completely broken. This is crazy, however. As I raised my head and scanned my surroundings, I realized that it wasn't only the suit's barrier which was destroyed because of that one attack. The press conference room, which was filled with numerous people just a moment ago, was completely gone. All those who were living just a moment ago had become either corpses or were severely wounded and were strewn all over the place. The hunters who survived the shock were also by no means unstashed. They were all stumbling to wherever they felt safe with one or two limbs gone, and in the sky above, Monster 2 and Seol Yungyeon Newnham were facing each other. I rose to my feet and quickly checked my physical condition. Fortunately, even when all the suit's barriers were exhausted, I suffered no major injuries thanks to my SS rank body. "Newnham, are you okay?" Newnham asked without looking at me. Her pinkish sword had already been drawn, aiming at the monster. I promptly drew my sword and faced the monster. At that moment, I could finally see what I didn't see earlier. #cliché. #sad ending. #none. What the? Although I couldn't understand the sentence properly, to some extent the text was readable. However, what caught my eyes the most was 3 hashtags attached under the title. Cliché, sad ending, and what the hell is none? While I was wondering, Monster 2 slowly lowered his head and met my eyes. "You see Autumn." That's me. It was as expected. Like with the gray human, I was also able to talk to him. "I didn't know why you do all the things you do here. What's your purpose? Did you come to Earth for me?" "Yes." "Why?" Then the monster blinked. "That I don't know." "Is that so though? Whatever its purpose was, it doesn't matter." After loading the Winchester, which was now close to the finished form, I aimed it at him with one hand. "If you don't know, you must die." Bullets equipped with various energy analyzers quickly fly to the monster. However, at that moment, the power facility underneath the floor exploded, creating a magnetic field. Thus, the trajectory of my bullet was bent. Protagonist S skill, Protagonist Cliché, has been activated. Cliché: no one, the protagonist could never be hit by bullets fired by the enemy. Monster 2 caught the straying bullet between its fingers and threw it back at me. I hurriedly activated Dharma footwork technique and escaped the trajectory. Cliché number 2, however, the protagonist's bullets will always hit their enemy. The bullet bent because of the wind and hit my leg. It was only a light blow, but the impact caused me to roll over the floor. Shortly thereafter, Monster number 2 turned his palm toward me to create a whirlpool, but when he saw Newnham blitzing towards it, it immediately turned its hand away. A shock wave swept the area as the sword and the hand collided. Then, Newnham clenched the hilt of her sword with her 2 hands and then slowly let her body hang down like a cherry blossom floating on the shore of a lake. Jinma Heavenly Art. Jinma Sword of Destruction. Snow Plum Blossom. Waves of pink spread from the tip of the sword. At the end of the wave, plum blossoms began to scatter. If there was a difference between cherry blossoms and plum blossoms are shorter than cherry blossoms, but they fill the world densely. The skin of Monster 2 began to peel at the feast of plum blossoms that rained like a heavy snowfall in midwinter. Without even realizing that its own body was being wounded, it gradually crushed into powder just like that. Before long, the feast of plum blossoms completely covered Monster 2 to the extent that it could not be seen at all. I thought that was also what Noonan intended, but suddenly my mouth opened and a word came out without my permission. Noonan, did you kill it? Cliché No. 3. If the protagonist was badly wounded and the enemy says, "Did you kill it?" afterwards, the protagonist will appear once again without a single wound. Noonan's plum blossoms were scattered in an instant, and Monster 2 appeared from it. "Hey Flowerpot, is it still not ready?" "It's complete, Tilda." At the same time as the answer fell, I gathered mana in both hands and brought my hands to the floor. The legendary sealing Magic 7 barriers, which was said to have sealed even the Balrogs at one time, was activated. A stone, which looked like a moon, floated into the air and then pillars of fire shot up. The monster's appearance disappeared in an instant. Damn, where? The moment I said that, I fell to the floor as I felt pain in my back. Then, a message appeared in my mind. 4. If the protagonist ever suddenly disappears mid-fight, if the opponent says, "Damn, where is he?" the protagonist will always appear from behind the enemy. You should have told me sooner. The attack landed on my back was not fatal, so I hurriedly rolled down the floor to widen the gap. Amongst all the protagonists so far, there were several who had similar skills as Monster 2. However, none of them had a power as blatant as Monster 2's power. That being said, Monster 2's power was simply broken. It had the most broken cheat skills I've ever seen. However, I have come across countless clichés while traveling to hunt protagonists, and I have broken countless clichés so far. On top of it, I also have my own skill, Protagonist Hunter. Therefore, I wouldn't just sit still and fall for all the clichés Monster 2 was armed with. Chapter 247. Earth North Pacific. In the vicinity of the collapsed Hell Gate Research Center, some of the remains of the buildings which could not sink were swept away by the waves and floated in the open sea. In the meantime, 8 aircraft carriers, which mostly were filled with U.S. troops camouflaged as UN peacekeeping forces, rushed forward. The aircraft carriers with added etheric technology had a history of defeating SSS-ranked Great Monster Kraken. Therefore, to honor that, all of these aircraft carriers were called Kraken-class aircraft carriers LPDs. But in reality, it's the hunters who boarded the ship who beat it. Taylor 9 looked at the open sea with bored eyes as those thoughts running on her head. For her, whether there were 8 Kraken-class aircraft carriers or not, it didn't really matter. Tusk, I can't even enjoy the sea view because of the boats. The things that obstructed Taylor's view weren't just the aircraft carriers. Behind the parade of aircraft carriers, several destroyer-class ships followed closely. Even under the sea, submarines followed and fighter jets were flying in the sky. Hunter Taylor, we have arrived at our destination. Okay. Can you come to the captain's office? I was already on my way. Taylor lied, answering through the remote radio placed in her ears. In all carriers combined, thousands of B and A rank hunters and more than 200 S rank hunters gathered. However, only a handful of SS rank hunters had gathered here. Of the less than 100 SS rank hunters on the planet, including those affiliated with Murem, only 9 people had gathered here. Under normal circumstances, this big of an army would rarely be seen moving together. It was only possible because the worst-case scenario had happened, the collapse of the Hell Gate Research Center. As Taylor scrambled down the hallway to get to the captain's office, she opened her mouth wide when she saw a huge, red object that had begun to appear in front of the convoy. That object was the entrance to Hell Gate, the place she had heard a lot but saw it for the first time in her entire life. He survived after entering that place through that. To be honest, Taylor was quite scared at the moment. Fear was something which normal people would feel when they were standing in front of Hell Gate. So, Taylor thought, what was UC Autumn thinking when he entered such a place? And now he wants to enter that place again. However, there was still a lot of time to go before she would follow him inside. Right now, she was here only to search the area, clear out any monsters that escaped from the Hell Gate and recover the wreckage of the Hell Gate lab. And the ultimate goal was to install a temporary shelter. The Hellgate Research Center had a special gate obstruction device installed, but thankfully, even when it had disappeared, all the professors shared the same diagnosis: Hellgate's expansion rate had decelerated. So for now, if she just does what she was supposed to do, nothing special will happen. But what the hell is that? Taylor approached the window, literally put her nose 1 inch away from it, and stared at Hellgate. There, just like the corona radiating from the sun, something like an aurora was leaking out from the Hellgate's entrance. It wasn't only Taylor who discovered it, proven by the fact that the alarm rang loudly throughout the cabin. Anomaly occurring, anomaly occurring. Instructions to be prepared for battle had been issued, and the hunters and soldiers quickly ran to somewhere. However, unlike them, Taylor stayed there and looked at Hellgate for a long time. What the hell is that? Something felt ominous. 13. If the protagonist is attacked by multiple enemies, the enemy will only attack one at a time. It's a very historic cliché. The majority of people who attack the protagonist for some reason will always rush one by one instead of going together, and the next one will just get hit just like the one who rushed ahead by the protagonist. That's precisely the situation I found myself in right now. Body movement skill is momentarily suppressed by the skill protagonist cliché. Hyuk. At the same time, Seol Youngyeon Neunam cut one of Monster 2's arms, but she was promptly countered, which forced her to retreat. At the moment when the monster was showing a gap, if I had come forward and attacked it with a big magic shot, I could have landed a fatal blow, but unfortunately I couldn't move yet because of the monster's skill, where I couldn't attack him till the monster regained its stability. The skill Protagonist Hunter partially resists the skill effect. Fortunately, the debuff lasts shorter than normal debuff, but it was almost meaningless due to the difference in ability between him and me. When I was about to move, a sudden storm hit my body and threw me to the ground. Bang bang. Damn that cliché. As I was wiping the blood coming down from my lips, Neunam, who was visibly exhausted, raised her sword to the sky. Although it was not strange for support to come late with 9. While the protagonist is fighting the main villain, support never comes for the villain cliché being triggered, so we could not even hope for it. The level of influence it has on the world was just as dangerous as, or even more dangerous than, the protagonist who shifted the world's common sense into his own, which I fought in the past. Translator's note: for those who forgot who this protagonist he mentioned is, it's the Japanese protagonist from the long-ass world title. If that protagonist was at a level where he can change the common sense and the laws of physics of the world, then Monster 2 is shaking the fate of this world itself. And in order to gain such great feasts, a lot of probability needs to be consumed. In other words, Monster 2 was extremely dangerous. After all, the more it gets attacked, the faster the Earth will be on its way to destruction. Now that I know that fact, another fact comes to my mind: that monster will never die. As long as Earth did not perish, and as long as there is even a slight probability left on Earth, it will live on until it has exhausted all the probabilities of this world. What should I do? How can I win? Why isn't the Protagonist Hunter skill not doing anything? This skill has been ignoring the probability of numerous protagonists and destroying them, but for some reason, it didn't work right now. Is it because my level is too low? No, if it was for that reason, it simply makes no sense. I even successfully hunted down the Supreme Dharma, who was far stronger than that monster. It means that the Protagonist Hunter skill can still interfere with the cliché of the protagonist on that level. I am missing something here. If the system was still here, she would surely have given me some advice. If it's Riene, what would she say to me in this situation, I wonder? At that moment, my heart became surprisingly calmer than before. For some reason, I remembered the advice Riene had given me in the distant past. It wasn't a very meaningful word, but a simple sentence. You can just do what you normally do. Why did I think of that moment right now? It felt too artificial, but I don't care, because that gave me a pretty decisive hint. Neunam. I am still fine, Seol Youngyeon Neunam answered. She was breathing heavily, but there wasn't even a single tremor in the hand which held the sword. It proved that she was still able to continue the fight. Can you trust me and use a great skill just once? She looked at my eyes, obviously doubting my words. After all, it's not like she deliberately didn't use a big skill. It was just wasteful since the enemy would still avoid it in the end. If she performs such a skill again and again, it will only turn their winning chance slimmer than before once she expends all her stamina. But her doubt didn't last long. She nodded her head with a firm expression and raised her sword upright. Then the monster moved and tried to point his palm at Noonan, but I shouted first. No matter if it's an ally or an enemy, when they are preparing for a big skill, the protagonist never tries to distract them. At that moment, the attack which Monster 2 launched changed direction and blitzed towards me. Boom! The ground turned upside down as a shock wave swept the area after the attack clashed with the layers of defense I had erected. However, at that moment, Noonan finished her preparations. Contrary to magic, the preparations for the attack of the Murim warriors were not very long, so it's enough to just distract the enemy for a short time. As Noonan slowly shook her sword, the movement of the air changed. Even Monster 2, who was able to forcibly manipulate the weather conditions, just stood there. It seems like the flow of air which Noonan shook had reached the stage where it couldn't be controlled. Jinma Heavenly Art. Jinma Sword of Destruction. Zor. To me, it just looked as if the sword was drawn vertically down very slowly, but the next moment, I felt as if the world had turned black and the sky was torn in half. Amidst those illusions, only the trace of the sword that Noonan waved showed off its presence. But at that moment, time slowed down. 14. Just before the protagonist receives the final blow, time slows down as they recall the past. In that slowed world, I desperately rolled my eyes. Drops of sweat, scattered dust, and even broken clouds could be easily seen. Everything was motionless, almost stationary even. Only me, who can resist the cliché, and Noonan, whose sense was already beyond the human realms, were aware of this fleeting moment. Of course, even though we were aware of it, we couldn't do anything. I could see the hand holding the sword tremble slightly as a bewildered expression was painted on Noonan's face. 15. Someone's advice always appears in the protagonist's recollection of the past, and that advice plays a decisive role in the protagonist's attempt to overcome the crisis. The protagonist's cliché skill, which was almost like a cheat, was activated again, and the monster started to move its body again. It stepped away from the trajectory of Noonan's attack to avoid being mortally wounded. But it doesn't matter. In the first place, I was aiming for that exact moment. An enemy who recalls the past before the final blow is always defeated. Again, this was a cliché. If the protagonist recalls the past, it will eventually become an opportunity for them to awaken and realize their latent abilities. But if the villain was the one who recalls the past, it was a sign that they will be defeated. As soon as my words fell, Monster 2 stopped on its track, and then Noonan's attack cut its body in exactly half. When its body parts into two, a message comes to my mind. Warning: probability exceeded the limit. Use my life force to offset it. Impossible. Damn it. I can't turn into a protagonist just yet. After all, I was never supposed to be the protagonist of Earth. Once I become the protagonist, I will be anchored to this world, and I will not be able to enter Hell Gate. On top of it, because of me, the world I loved will be destroyed. I can't. There is still a chance. Then can we move to the nearest dimension? Precise movement is impossible without the power of the system. I bet that was the case. After all, you are nothing but a will that Rene left behind. The reason humans find it difficult to reach towards the unknown realms was because they have never experienced the unknown. However, while traveling to countless worlds, I made dozens of dimensional shifts, and in the process, I experienced a sense of melting into space several times and adapted to it. Although I cannot perform it by myself if it's only moving to a dimension which is connected to Earth, such as a dungeon, crack, and Hell Gate, I was certain I could do it. Hyukai moved towards the monster, whose body slowly recovered. 17. When the enemy thought that the protagonist had suffered the final blow, it was nothing but an illusion because the things inside their clothes blocked the attack. You are not wearing anything. The healing of the wound was cancelled. Its power had become so weak that the cliché was cancelled even with a single sentence from me. If not now, there will be no chance again. I grabbed the monster's head with both hands. Do you want to move right now? I looked into the eyes of Xiao Yungyun, who was slowly approaching me. What are you trying to do? This is the only way to kill this monster. What are you? I'll take this guy to Hell Gate. What the bewildered expression of Noonan made it evident that my plan was nothing but reckless, but it can't be helped. It seems that the thought of crawling safely into the Hell Gate was me being greedy. I thought so and told Noonan, "I'll be back again soon, so please wait for me." Wait. Noonan hurriedly approached me using her movement technique, but she couldn't catch me. Moving to another dimension. Chapter 248. Vivienda Empire. Araceli, who was able to save her world from the imminent destruction, spent a leisure time with Empress Sahar. Both of them stayed in a hut they built in the forest with a good mountain view, good air, and good quality necessities like food and water. If they need firewood, they would cut firewood, and if they need food, they would simply either hunt or harvest the vegetables they had cultivated. However, contrary to Araceli, who is enjoying this kind of life, Empress Sahar was very dissatisfied. "Just go out into the world and say your name right now, everyone will look up to you," she said. "That is burdensome. I don't understand why." The Vivienda Empire did not know that the archmage they always looked up to had returned. No, they didn't even know that their world had already been destroyed once and everything had been reverted, but Araceli did not even try to reveal the truth. "How can you go through all that hard work and yet keep everything a secret? I don't understand." "Well, this world doesn't need me anymore," Araceli smiled bitterly and continued. "Moreover, I also prefer to live a simple life like this." Empress Sahar said nothing more. She has always lived a luxurious life, but she didn't want that life even in another dimension. Because in the first place, she had already given up on everything she had when she decided to move from her home dimension. From that day on, the leisurely days continued. Araceli recovered all of her circles, but she still couldn't pinpoint where UC Autumn was. So, when Araceli had free time, she sat down at the little handmade table she made and fiddled with blue cubes she received from the dragon. This is the thing the dragon gave to me right before the world line changed. Dragons were something which were treated as mysterious beings in any dimension. It was due to the fact that only a handful of people have seen them. However, from time to time, anecdotes related to dragons were recorded. In particular, when the world is in crisis, they would always suddenly appear like a hero, save everyone, before disappearing once again. In fact, Vivienda Academy was also visited by the dragon when they were on the brink of collapse. However, the situation had already been resolved by Araceli and her group, and the dragon returned after tossing the gift at her. By the way, what is this gift? No matter how much Araceli rolled her head, she didn't know what was its use. "Why don't you visit the Imperial Library? I heard that there are records related to dragons there." Yeah, there's indeed records about dragons there, but I've never read it. In the first place, Araceli was someone who had no interest in superstition, so she had never even touched books related to dragons. "Then should we sneak in and check it out? I'm really curious." "That sounds fun." Sometimes it was necessary to deviate from these small daily routines, so it would be a good memory to sneak into the top-secret archive of the Imperial Library, which was said to be the most heavily secured place in the Empire, and read books about those dragons. The plan was implemented immediately, and frankly, it wasn't that difficult. Araceli and Empress Sahar, who had snuck into the library, took a lamp hung on the wall with her hand and blew the dust piled up on top of the books. To be honest, she could do anything with the flick of her finger, whether it's light or dust removal, but she just wants to create an analog-like feeling. There are surprisingly a lot of books about dragons. It was because there's a record that this world was visited by dragons thousands of years ago. Well, there are quite a few people who claimed it was real, but there's little evidence left now. In fact, there were quite a few statues of dragons erected throughout the Vivienda Empire. There's also a kingdom which was said to be a descendant of dragons a few hundreds years ago, although in modern times, it was all unified under the banner of Magic Empire Vivienda. Here, Empress Sahar put some papers in front of Araceli. These are all documents related to the object. Really, there were more dragon-related legends than Araceli expected, and surprisingly, the answer to the cube she had failed to understand was quickly found. The Dimensional Traveler's Guide, even though it could only be used once, it was said that the object Araceli currently possessed was once used by a person who wanted to chase their loved one who was far away beyond time and space. But it's too early to be happy, because it seems that the cube Arakeli has had already been used. Why is this happening to me? Arakeli lamented. Few minutes later, just as Empress Sahar rummaged through the book to see if there was a way to use the cube again, Arakeli suddenly dropped the cube and sprung to her feet. Hi. What's wrong? What's going on? Oh no, that's Arakeli stuttered as she looked all over the place. Empress Sahar closed the book, stood up, and put her hand on Arakeli's shoulder. Calm down, take it slow, and look into my eyes. What's going on? At that time Arakeli barely spoke. Cold sweat ran all over her body. I can't feel it all of a sudden. What do you mean you can't feel it? Empress Sahar felt as if Arakeli was going to say something ominous. Suddenly, the professor's energy disappeared. I can no longer feel it. Sahar's premonition turned out to be correct. What Arakeli just said was quite a shock to her. It was to the point she was speechless and didn't know what to do. The two of them stared blankly at each other's eyes, not saying anything for a long, long time. Pacific Ocean near Hell Gate. 8 Kraken-class aircraft carriers each carried 100 jet fighters on them. There are also destroyer-class battleships surrounding it on all sides, so it was a stretch to say that one Kraken-class carrier would be able to envelop both the sky and the water. Each aircraft carrier carried a special protection designed by another league, which enabled them to convert ether into a magic shield and various other technologies such as magic radar. Not only that, thousands of hunters were also aboard on the aircraft carriers. With a force of this size, any monsters would be dead before they could even get close. Breaking news: the expansion of Hell Gate had begun. Absorption of energy proceeds. Suddenly, a huge tongue came out from inside the Hell Gate, pierced the clouds, and plunged into the sea as if trying to take root on Earth. Thousands of eyes twitched from the tongue, and some deformed features, which looked like mouths, noses, hands, and feet, gushed out. In front of the grotesque scene, people vomited, and some people who had weak minds and bodies even passed out. Even though all the people gathered here were veterans, there were always people who just couldn't stand to look at it. Shortly after, fighter jets far in the sky fired missiles in succession, and the tentacles exploded, scattering into the sea. Enemy monsters' defense is weaker than expected. Originally, the reasons for not being able to use weapons such as missiles in a fight against monsters was because such devices could not be brought inside the dungeon where they didn't work properly, and using them in urban cities in case of a dungeon break would destroy the buildings around it. However, as the years passed and a new substance called mana was discovered, the situation changed a lot. It was now possible to use modern weapons which could break the enemy's energy shield. Something is strange. Istit Taylor 9 conjured 5 spheres of light and floated into the air and looked at the monster coming out of the Hell Gate. At this moment, Hell Gate was still rapidly absorbing Earth's energy, and the monsters inside were constantly coming out. But it looked as if the monsters were forcibly squeezed out rather than naturally coming out. It was as if the Hell Gate itself was trying to throw away all the monsters inside. And the truth is, Taylor's conjecture was right. However, unbeknown to Taylor, Hell Gate was trying to squeeze out every monster inside to Earth, rather than just a few of them. Once that happened, it was doubtful whether these 8 aircraft carriers would be able to block it. Hunter Taylor. While she was piercing the foreheads of the monsters approaching from the sea with her sphere of light, someone called her. It was General Robert, the commander in charge who had 3 stars on his shoulder. What happened? As General Robert was famous worldwide as someone who, despite his lack of superpower, had never once retreated from the battlefield, Taylor respected him a lot. I have heard news from inland. They told me to tell you right away. In Shanghai, China, another League's Guild Master Yu Xiaodam and Murim Lord Xiao Yungyun had a bloody battle with the so-called Monster 2 and finally succeeded in killing it. Oh, as expected, it was good news to convey, but for some reason General Robert's expression was not happy at all. And what? The quick-witted Taylor asked first, and Robert said. Guildmaster Yu Xiaodam seems to have entered the Hell Gate alone. Yes, wait, we are guarding this place, how can he? I don't know about that, but since it was the testimony of the Murim Lord, it should have been true. Taylor massaged her forehead arms. They had decided to enter the Hell Gate together, yet he still entered alone. Why? Despite her confusion, General Robert continued his speech. Now, reinforcements are coming. They are bringing the Murim warriors of the new Murim as well as another league's Hellgate expedition team. It's reassuring, but General Robert looked at Hellgate with a bitter expression. Would it be possible to rescue Hunter U. Seatum? They looked around the Hellgate. Both of them wondered what the hell the Hellgate was doing by pouring out monsters over and over again. However, at that moment the answer came to them. The sea of over 200 m turned into an environment similar to the inside of Hellgate, which they only see through videos. The monsters, which had just left the Hellgate entrance, began to stagger and walk over it. Some monsters were so huge that the bombardment didn't work at all, and some just walked and killed themselves. Not only that, a red cloud began to form over the Hellgate. Gas. Wear a gas mask. Taylor silently pressed the belt attached to his wrist. Then, the etheric suit, which had been converted into a baseball jumper that she wore, instantly transformed into a black suit covering her entire body. It was the newly developed suit which was able to adapt to even the environment of Hellgate. What the hell is the situation? Taylor didn't know for sure, but if it's true that U. Seatum really went to Hellgate, the exit is only this entrance anyway. Then, there was nothing she could do other than wipe the exit clean so that U. Seatum could come back comfortably. You bastard, I'll kill you when I see you later. Chapter 249. The Hellgate area around the entrance constantly expanded as the material from the inside poured out. The seawater around it had completely solidified, so hunters could not land there either. However, within the grotesque area, no machine worked properly, and it was very difficult for some hunters to even keep their sanity within the area. It wasn't just a matter of supernatural strength, it was a matter of mental power. After all, who could easily set foot in that horrific place where limbs protruded from what was thought as a wall, mouths that suddenly appeared from the ground, cutting off their ankles before running away, and eyes twitching in the sky? We have to deal with it as soon as possible. Fortunately, the Hellgate's expansion was temporarily prevented thanks to Lacanthal, a magic engineer from another world who came to join the army on a high-speed boat together with another league's raid team. He installed a special device that looked like a power transmission tower on 8 aircraft carriers, which created a dimension screen upon activation, blocking the extension of the Hellgate area. Of course, this is only a temporary measure. We must destroy all of those plants to stop the expansion at once. These so-called plants weren't living things, but they can't be considered dead as well. Those bizarre substances which moved with their own will were slowly coloring the Pacific Ocean with Hellgate's substance, and destroying them could wipe out some of the realm. In other words, currently the fight was on a stalemate. The Hellgate can no longer expand further, but it was also impossible for the human army to enter either. Isn't there any other way? Well, in response to the question of Murim Lord Seal Yungyeon, Lacanthal could only glance around. Large guilds had their own meeting rooms spread through the 8 ships, but another league didn't have it. It was simply because there was no room available. However, thanks to the active support from the UN, the operation control room of 1 aircraft carrier was transformed into a temporary meeting room for them. However, even though it was another league's meeting room, there were quite a lot of big names in attendance, such as the 3 Stars Commander-in-Chief, General Robert, several SS-ranked hunters, masters of famous guilds, and 20-year-old veteran hunters who were famous for their solo activities. There's a way, and it is rather simple. Form a team consisting of only a few elite hunters and go inside. If we cut the plant on the inside first, the plant on the outside will also disappear, effectively destroying the Hellgate area. Of course, it didn't mean that whoever didn't get chosen to enter the Hellgate would not have the same risk as the one who entered. However, it's also important to station some hunters on the outside to prevent the personnel who entered inside from being isolated. Therefore, the number of people participating in this operation would be a lot. In the plan, the guild members of another league were the only ones who were supposed to enter the Hellgate. But now things have changed a lot. If they did not reduce the area of the Hellgate manifesting on Earth by dispatching other hunters and the defensive line was breached, the Hellgate area would immediately stretch out and the area might even reach inland. Which means all available troops in this place had to participate in the operation. Hunters and soldiers with at least 10 years of experience in monster warfare should camp in the area. A certain number of troops could not endure the sheer pressure emitted by the Hellgate and its grotesque nature due to their lack of mental power, and most of the machines did not even work, so they needed an etheric dispenser and the experienced veteran hunters. On top of it, hunters with a rank of B or lower with no experience are practically useless. Pardon that. At Lacanthal's words, most of the people in the meeting room were bewildered. In fact, everyone should have fully agreed with what he said. After all, no matter how advanced the ether dispenser is, what can an F-rank hunter do with it? However, there's one reason why they expressed their doubts like this. It was because of the involvement of UC Autumn, who had no superpower at all, at the last Hellgate expedition 8 years ago. If you said that F-rank hunters will be useless, we might agree with you. What I said was simply a fact. It is because hunters below B rank wouldn't offer much help even when armed with various things. How didn't Hunter UC Autumn enter the Hell Gate even when he's only F rank? That's something I never thought made sense myself. Lacanthal sighed. If it were me, I would never take an F rank hunter into the Hell Gate lest I want to get everyone killed. At that time, the leader of the expedition was an SS rank hunter, and I heard that there were also many elite troops in the team he made. If he simply took Master UC Autumn just for him to be a porter, it would make more sense if he took a hunter with a physical strengthening superpower rather than him. Even so, the fact that the leader of the expedition dared to take an F-rank hunter means that UC Autumn wasn't chosen for his fighting prowess. But then, it only makes another question buzz on Lacanthal's mind. Why did UC Autumn agree to enter the Hell Gate? Also, how did he come back outside without going crazy? But whatever the reason, it doesn't matter right now. What they need to do as of now had no relation with that reason after all, and if they want to know the truth, they need to pave the way for UC Autumn to return safely first. Transfer complete. When I lose control of my mind, I sometimes dream of things. The contents of the dream are mostly nothing important, but sometimes I re-experience the events I had experienced in the past. Such as the time when I first became a hunter, my very first monster hunt, or when I formed a party with other children, whom the word colleagues was more appropriate to use rather than friends. Amongst those colleagues, Riene Ju disappeared into the very first great crack which appeared on Earth, and right now, I was dreaming about the times when I chased after her and entered Hell Gate. Back in those days in Hell Gate 8 years ago, there were brave colleagues, trustworthy leaders, and reliable comrades whom I could always trust my back with. However, most of them died and all the remaining survivors went crazy. Haha, see Autumn, this is my wife. Didn't I say that I wanted to introduce her to you every day? She's a looker, isn't she, baby? Are you shy? Come here. However, the truth is, the one he introduced wasn't his wife, but a monster. No matter how many times I told him, he didn't believe me. He asked me why I called her a monster and ended up shooting me, so I had no choice but to kill him. How long has it been since the last time I ate beefsteak as expected? The T-bone fits my palate the best. Did you know what white truffle is? It is said to be one of the world's top 3 delicacies. Not everyone gets the chance to eat this thing. See Autumn, would you like to take a bite too? It's not food, it's the body of the colleague I just killed. I begged them not to eat it, but they didn't listen, so I had no choice but to kill them too. Some of my colleagues were killed by monsters, but most were killed by my hand. It's not out of the ordinary, it's just that when someone enters Hell Gate, everyone naturally becomes like that. And I was destined to be like that too. Interesting, what are you? Until I heard that voice. I didn't understand it at first. I only thought I had become crazy just like my colleagues. Otherwise, there would be no reason why I heard auditory hallucinations. But there was one crucial difference between my mentally ill colleagues and myself. They were unaware that they were crazy, while I was aware that I was hearing hallucinations. Calm down, it took me a really long time to understand your language. I am really glad I managed to learn the language you speak. Haha. Who the hell are you? Me, well, if I had to call myself, I think I am the will of this world, which you're calling Hell Gate to be exact. I am Hell Gate itself. The will of the Hell Gate. Yeah, that's right. Interesting, right? I was surprised too, because I didn't even know I had a will until I encountered a conscious being like you. But now I know, and now I even have a dream. I conversed with it as if I was possessed. It said that he was originally an unfinished world wandering in the blank story, and he struggled to shape the world to complete himself and ended up in such a terrible state. Hell Gate, a world in which there is no distinction between non-living and living things, even between others and oneself. Now I can definitely realize my dreams. I will make a perfect world. It will not be a world where the story flows according to the will of the protagonist, but a world which is completely independent from the story. I don't understand what you mean. Then the will started to explain it to me. Each world exists for only one protagonist, and if the protagonist perishes from existence, the world loses its existence. Without exception, all worlds follow that principle. It even said that perhaps even his own world, this Hell Gate, would have ended up in that same state too. So I stretched out my will to every world and established a concept of completeness. After all, the moment such a concept is established, the world quickly begins to run toward destruction, and I am building my own world little by little by absorbing the power of those destroyed worlds. What will happen if you do that? Isn't it obvious? It began to take shape little by little. It definitely appeared in front of me in a form that looked exactly like me and said with a smile that was similar to mine, "A world where everyone can be the protagonist will be created." Don't you think the world is unreasonable that it's unfair? Look at you. Unlike your friends, you don't have any superpowers, connections, parents, and even your foster parents are dead. You were born poor and will end up living like that until you meet your end. It's because someone like you is just a background character that exists for the sake of the protagonist. Those guys are taking away all the fate and probability you could have had. But what if you're living in a world where everyone is the protagonist? You don't have to go through such absurdity anymore. A world where you don't have to live the way fate has decided. How is it I can save you right here and now, and you can help me? Me how? That moment I woke up from my dream. My chest and my back were wet. Cold sweat was also dripping from my forehead. Since when have I been sleeping? No, what was I doing up until now? I forced a dimensional shift to the Hell Gate in order to defeat Monster 2. The dimensional shift to Hell Gate has been completed. Yes, in the end, I succeeded in moving to the Hell Gate and defeating the monster. Haha, I burst into laughter as my heart felt relieved, but at that very moment I sprung to my feet. I was startled by the sound of a loud horn. "You crazy bastard, why are you laying down in the middle of a crosswalk? Hey, get out of there quickly." When the middle-aged truck driver roared with visible anger towards me, I unknowingly walked towards the side of the road. With the corner of my eyes, I could see people looking at me as I passed by. Did I do something strange? Wait, they were talking about my clothes. Well, what kind of armor is that? Is it cosplay? Something is strange. In modern times, thanks to the design of the ether suit, which was full of individuality, my plain armor didn't get much attention. No, this place should be inside the Hell Gate. Should it? The system also had already told me that I had successfully moved to Hell Gate. But a tall gray building, flashing neon signs, crossroads as well as crosswalks, people in casual clothing of modern design and cars spewing fumes. No matter how I look at it, this place was undoubtedly Earth. "Can you please get out of the way?" Someone tapped my shoulder and passed by. I looked over the man's head without realizing it, and I had no choice but to open my eyes wide. Park Seon-ju. #office worker. #taken. Why is the manager already angry this early? My eyes darted wildly as I was surprised because I suddenly met a protagonist out of nowhere. However, he's not the only protagonist in this place. Something which I never experienced before was happening in front of me right now. Kim David. #unemployed. #Korean American. #handsome. #I want to appear on a foreign TV program. Kim Seok-kwon. #soccer player. #father of 2 daughters. #I love you Seong. Seo Hanwol. #college student. #self-made. #taken. #who wants to have a drink today. A protagonist hashtag was floating above the heads of everyone passing by. However, when I looked closely at each of them, they were all far too ordinary to be a protagonist. Some were ordinary office workers, some were ordinary college students, and some were just ordinary people. A world where everyone was the protagonist even though they were ordinary. Don't tell me I pedaled back as realization dawned upon me. However, just after a few steps, I was forced to turn back as my back hit something. What I saw there was surprising. No, it was an understatement. It simply made my mind go blank. Because protagonists are murdered by me. #modern time. #hunter. #world hopping. You are the protagonist of this world. I finally turned into a protagonist. Chapter 250. I always entertained the idea of becoming a protagonist. It was because the only way I could think of to destroy Hell Gate was through this method. I really did become the protagonist of Hell Gate as it is now. If I do anything that consumes probability, I will quicken the end of the world and the epilogue will arrive. But can I really do that? When I looked around, thousands of ordinary people were walking on the streets. The sight was no different from the scene I saw on Earth. No, to be honest, it was exactly the same as Earth. No, how can my conviction shake this late in the game? It can't be, and it also wouldn't be the case. After all, the sight of the chaotic Hell Gate, which I saw 8 years ago, was still vivid in my mind. I immediately grabbed someone who was passing by and asked, "Excuse me, but what year is it now? What, you are not even wearing a mask?" "Yes. It is 2020, and since a pandemic is circling all over the world right now, please wear a mask." "Ah, yes. If it's 2020, it was the year when the first gate appeared and the Great War broke out on Earth. And judging by the fact that the temperature is quite low, the current time should be around November to December. If it were the Earth I belong to, it wouldn't be strange if gates suddenly appeared nonstop. But it didn't happen here, so is this a world without gates?" I walked along the street. It was because I believed that in order to fully understand the situation, I had to hear and see more. And the more I walked, the more people looked at me. Some talked about why I didn't wear a mask, while some discussed my clothes, which in their standard was weird. A pandemic, huh? I can't remember anything like that happening around this year on my original Earth. After all, after the technological advances caused by the discovery of the materials from the gates, and with the use of ether technology, the only pandemic still present on my Earth was nothing but influenza. What is the probability that I will catch the disease? Since you possess protagonist correction, the chance is none. So what about them? Aren't they protagonists too? Gibberish. What is this guy saying now? Those guys were indeed protagonists, however, they haven't received their protagonist correction. I quickly turned my body as my own voice was heard from my back. As soon as I turned back, I could see a man sitting on the overpass while biting on an apple, waving his hand to me. "Long time no see, you see Autumn." He smiled at me as he straightened the suit he wore. "Don't smile like that with my face." "Oh, sorry, I can't help it. After all, it is now impossible to move the world and make a new face and voice. Look, the world is almost complete, isn't it? Then, can we just let this world complete and get destroyed without us fighting each other?" Then Hellgates will shook his head. "No, we can't do that. Actually, you're only looking at the finished part right now. What you see now is just a small part of the goal I want to achieve." Saying that, he ripped off the reinforcing bars of the overpass. Then a terrible mass of flesh wriggled through the open section for a couple of seconds before disappearing once again. You know what? In order for game companies to reduce the overall capacity of the game they develop, all parts which are not visible to users are left blank. Users will feel that they are playing a finished world, but in reality, there is nothing inside of things that they're looking at. That is precisely the state of my world right now. He pointed his finger at the sky. Do you know how rain clouds are formed? It is formed when warm air from the earth rises, expands, and then cools in the sky. But my world hasn't been able to replicate even such a trivial setting yet. I had to do everything manually. What's wrong with doing it manually? Well, I will die soon, so I have to automate it. What? As if it was nothing special, he shrugged. Hasn't your memory come back yet? My lifespan is on the verge of ending. However, I will only die the moment the world is completed. Then you. That's right, it's all thanks to the contract I signed with you. At that moment, a memory flooded my mind. I used to have a perfect plan to realize my dream. It was to apply the concept of completion to many worlds. After all, with a world being destroyed, my world will be completed thanks to the energy from those destroyed worlds. By the way, why do you need my help? It smiled. My plan was a failure from the start. There were a lot more worlds than I expected which stopped their story before completion. Cancellation, indefinite hiatus, protagonist replacement, and such. For some reason, the worlds in which probability was no longer consumed began to increase. He said that he even intervened on several occasions. But the more I intervened, the shorter my lifespan became. It was only then I realized that I couldn't handle everything by myself. There seemed to be no way for him to realize his dream. However, in those dark days, I met you, and then I thought of a way. If the world couldn't complete the story by itself, why not create a protagonist of all worlds and let that one person complete all the stories? The moment I remembered it all, goosebumps rose all over my body. Wait a moment, I don't tell me. That's right, do you remember? The other Autumn smiled as he chewed the apple. I know what your plan is. You must have been planning to commit suicide after becoming the protagonist of this world, aren't you? My mind was blank. I wasn't only a protagonist of Hell Gate, but the protagonist of all other worlds, which means if I consumed all my probability, I will destroy all worlds except the Hell Gate. Ha, don't take it too seriously. There is still a grace period of 20 to 30 years, and during that time you will live your happiest time of all. The Will snapped his fingers. Then the Pacific Ocean in my real world was reflected on the screen that floated like a hologram in the air. More than 10 aircraft carriers and numerous battleships could be seen on the surface of the sea. Countless flying monsters, fighter jets and hunters were fighting in the sky, and within the realm of Hell Gate spread out over the sea, many hunters were fighting a bloody battle. Amidst all the chaos, familiar faces could be seen, my guild members, my most precious people. They are working so hard for you, to pave the way for you to return. Would you like to look at the scenario that will unfold for you from now on? Without waiting for my answer, some letters lined up in the air. Thanks to the efforts of another League guild members, the Hell Gate area is finally cleaned up. However, since there were still many monsters lurking inside the Hell Gate, it was unclear whether Hunter Autumn would return or not. I didn't want to read it, however my eyes couldn't help but to continue scanning the letters in the air. Omitted somehow, the Hell Gate began to crumble, and everyone around the world cheered at the spectacle. Master Autumn has done it. People praised him as a hero and went out into the streets, singing his name late into the night. However, no one in another league rejoiced. Please come back. After all, they didn't want a dead hero, they just wanted him to come back and live as an ordinary person. As I read it, I bit my lip. How is it? Did you like it? It was all thanks to the karma you have built up so far, and I think it's the reward you deserve. You deserve to be happy. Me too, I deserve it too. Omitted, but just before the Hell Gate completely collapsed, something came out from its entrance, and the people who were waiting on the spot knelt on the floor and cheered. It's Master Autumn. He had returned. That is what I will experience in the future as long as I follow the path set by the will of Hell Gate. In other words, something I would get in exchange for being the protagonist of the world. Aren't there a lot of beauties around you? Should I add harem to the tag of your story? But if I do that, your lifespan will be a little bit shorter. No need. Well, understandable, harem tag isn't popular these days, he said as he scrolled down the screen. You will become the king of Earth. You will have a power that no one dares to oppose. Your bad blood with Lost Day will also end. Perhaps Haram will beg you with tears in his eyes. Actually, it was for your sake. Wow, what a tearful ending. As of now, you are weaker than the White Witch, Arakeli, Seol Youngyeon, Taylor, and even Ha Sun-young, but once you get out of this place, you will acquire the world's strongest power. You will probably even surpass the Supreme Dharma, who was a URS rank. Alright, I will also throw in some more. I will connect Earth to all the worlds you've been to Vivienda, where Arakeli currently resides, to the world of Malia, who's still working hard at climbing the tower, to the world of your 4 players who are struggling among the constellations, and the world of Marilyn, who is struggling in the world of fairies. You will be able to reunite with all the people you have a connection with. A very, very happy ending awaits for me. You just have to turn around and walk out to get it all. He bit the apple again and smiled. For some reason, the size of the apple didn't decrease at all. As the protagonist of all worlds, shouldn't you be able to enjoy the happiness that befits your status? What about Riene? What will happen to Riene? Oh yeah, Riene. At my question, he scratched his head and made a troubled face. Can't be with you. I need her to edit your story. Isn't it romantic though? Riene, who loved Autumn, was the one who created a happily ever after for Autumn in the story. At his answer, I could feel rage bubbling up in my heart. This madman, is he serious? He smiled so much that I thought he had feelings. However, it seems like I was wrong. He had no emotions, he was only laughing to imitate a human being. Are you saying that people can be truly happy just by watching the person you love live happily from afar? Isn't that the case in dramas? Don't the protagonist often say, "It's enough for me to just watch her smile. It's enough for me as long as she is happy." I am going crazy. It seems like since he learned all the principles of the world through story, he just took it all as the correct ones. Give me back Renee. Sorry, that can't be done. This is also her will. Renee's will, it can't be. But a voice rang in my ears soon after, denying my denial. See, Autumn. Renee, where are you now? That I can't tell you. No, it's all okay, it's okay, so let's go back to Earth. Okay, let's stop doing this and go back. But she was silent at my pleading. She only answered after several seconds passed. Sorry. Startled by her words, I asked once again. My voice was not as loud as before, on top of it, it was quivering. Why? With me, you cannot be happy. The moment the contract is cancelled, you will die immediately. It doesn't matter if I die or not, just come here. Can't be done, that's the problem. Even though I love you, I can't just do so, because the moment you die, Earth will no longer receive your protagonist correction. Does it make sense that those who fight in the Pacific will win without your protagonist's correction? Haven't you experienced it too? Hellgate beings were something humans will never be able to overcome. I looked at Hellgate's will after hearing Renee's words. That's right, Hellgate's army is a lot stronger than you think. Wait, don't get me wrong. It's out of my reach in the first place. I can't interfere with everything in Hellgate. The reason they came out was because you broke into this place, you know. What he just said was something I was aware of. Hellgate spits out mass equal to the power of the ones who invade it. Therefore, the reason why so many monsters were invading Earth right now was because of the strong probability I carried within me. But I just heard something good. What I was talking about was the fact that the will cannot interfere with anything in Hellgate. Just knowing that was enough. Renee, you are right. The reason I hunt protagonists across the world is for my own benefit. That's right. Hellgate's will smiled brightly at me, and Renee sighed, seemingly relieved by my words. But now everything has changed. I can no longer live well alone. Sorry. I pulled out the pistol I had hidden in a socket on my waist and pointed it at my temple. Isn't it the job of the protagonist hunter to hunt the protagonist? It doesn't matter whether it is someone I love, a hero, or whoever. The autumn that's. Move me to the void of the world, a world of nothing, a world of where there's no story. Wait, please don't. Otherwise, I put my index finger on the trigger. I am going to pull the trigger. You're a crazy Renee, don't do anything and stay still. This guy is completely crazy. 3. You see, Autumn, do you want your world to perish? If you die, they will be defeated by the forces of Hellgate. Will it perish now, or will it perish in 20 or 30 years' time? If I can't stop it at all, it's better to end it right here, right now. This will be my last selfish thought. Do. And if you survive, even if the Earth wins, you will be thrown into the boundary of the story, tormented by nothingness forever. Do you really want that? Clack. The floor twisted and something rose up from the ground. It seems like it was there to stop me. Hellgate's will was forcing its probability to move me, but now I know that guy isn't that strong. You see, Autumn. I applied force to my index finger to pull the trigger. Starting dimensional movement. I could feel the presence of my body completely fading away. Chapter 251. My consciousness grew fainter and fainter. It felt as if all of my 5 senses had been cut off. What was I doing? Moving to another world. Oh yeah, thanks for letting me know. Moving to another world. Until now, I had done countless dimensional movements. It was to the point I was extremely familiar with it. A sensation of floating as if I was swimming in nothingness. Not sure what this feeling is called. Anyone who has ever ridden a gyro drop or a roller coaster express or a Viking might understand me. And when you multiply those sensations by maybe 100 times, that's what I feel like when moving between dimensions. Then suddenly a thought passed my mind. I want to eat kimchi ramyun with kimchi. Kimchi ramyun was literally kimchi-flavored ramyun, but if you eat it along with the real kimchi, it's really amazing. Oh, I also want to eat jjajangmyeon with sweet and sour pork. Actually, I don't like jjajangmyeon, but since Taylor liked it, I ended up eating lots of it. By the way, why am I thinking of all of this stuff now? The process of moving across dimensions was supposed to be completed in 1 second at the shortest and 10 seconds at the longest. But something is odd. Why does the dimensional shift feel so long? You are moving around the world. Flash. The moment I had that thought, I unknowingly opened my eyes and had no choice but suck in a deep breath. In front of me, the universe unfolded. An endless galaxy, a feast of beautiful constellations, which was stupendous no matter where one looked, unfolded in front of my eyes. As if they were trying to emphasize their attractiveness to me, their lights kept flickering. A wave of starlight touched me and then moved away. A humpback whale made of stars soared above the waves of starlight and then disappeared beyond. All the constellations in the world were spinning around me. Even if I tried to describe the sight in front of me, I would always fall short for words. It could only be summarized in one word: beautiful. Is this the same space I know? The space I knew was nothing more than a place with dark sky all over. Even if it feels like there are many constellations in the night sky, when you actually go out into space, there are more spaces without stars than space with stars, so it is normal to feel as if there is nothing in darkness. But why are there so many stars here? Each of these stars is a world. They are appealing their presence to you, who has become the center of the story. How Riene are you, Riene? That's right, Autumn, it's been a long time. No, we were always together, weren't we? That's right. We've been together all along, I just didn't know that she's Riene. Have you been well? Fine. Every time I wake up in the morning, I start my day by pouring out a cup of hot Americano. My laptop is also updated to the latest version, but since I am not good with that kind of stuff, I can't really understand what my laptop has become after each update. Is that so? Can I tell you something strange? All the stories in the world flowed into me. Therefore, throughout my time working here, I was able to see a lot of the world and learn both sad and happy stories. There are times when I burst into anger while watching a world with a makjang romance story. These were really nonsense and unproductive conversations. It's just a daily conversation with friends. However, I was so happy that I could have such a conversation with Riene. It made me a little sad though, as this might be the last conversation I will ever have with her. Riene kept telling me about her life. Since she already knows what I've been up to, I just listened to her in silence and smiled. However, at some point her happy storytelling ends. Then, you will soon find yourself in a void in the story. I know if I get farther away, the story won't progress anymore, right? In other words, I would find myself in a condition where I will be neither alive nor dead. Moreover, I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. The only future which awaits me is wandering through this darkness forever. However, the silver lining is, as I am the only protagonist in all the worlds right now, all other protagonists have become sub-protagonists. Therefore, the world will not be destroyed no matter what they do. After all, I have all their probability. As it is, I just have to wait until all probability accumulated in my body disappears. It's not a big deal. But how long do I have to wait until that happens? May have to wait thousands or even tens of thousands of years. By that time, your existence. I do not care, I was already happy enough. That's so. As Riene's voice subsided, I hurriedly asked, what happened to Earth? Fortunately, the invasion of Hell Gate was prevented. Since you are still alive, your probability progressed the story of Earth into the waiting for you, Autumn, to come back alive episode. I nodded in understanding. Earth would be stuck in that episode for a long time. After all, the episode would only progress once I return alive, which means Earth won't be destroyed anytime soon. And since I already left many things on Earth, magic, science, and different kinds of martial arts, many people will remember me. Even if I disappear like this, I am incredibly happy to know that there are so many people who will still love me. After all, for me, who was once just an F-rank hunter who could just die anytime in some random corner of the world, hopping more than this was nothing but greed. This much was already something I didn't deserve. Would you like to see the colleagues you've been with for the last time? I tried to say no, but I couldn't, since Riene, who stared into the air without saying a word, suddenly brought up a holographic screen. Taylor was the first to appear on that screen. she was still in the Pacific Ocean, sitting on some kind of chair. From time to time, she would doze off. However, she would jerk up and look back at the spot where the Hell Gate's entrance used to be before falling asleep once again while looking at the night sky where a meteor shower was falling. Show the others too. Next was Yekaterina. She was in her office. I noticed that there was a large picture of me hanging in the back which wasn't there the last time I was there. It seems like she was the one who hung it there. It seems like before she could mourn over my disappearance, she was caught up in the hustle and bustle of work. The thick dark circles under her eyes prove that. Yekaterina suddenly turned her attention to the TV that was playing in the corner of the office. Chichik breaking news: the monsters of Hell Gate who lived in hiding in the mirror world have started pouring out. The Murim League is responding quickly, but it is happening all over the world at the same time. According to the opinion of experts, the remaining monsters of Hell Gate will make their last move, and that this will truly be the last war of mankind. After all the cleaning we did, there's still some mirror worlds left. Just how many are there though? It doesn't look like humanity would lose, because those monsters were nothing but remnants in the end. Perhaps another league will play a big role here as well, and it will become a world-class guild. As I thought so, the screen showed other guild members of the Another League. Ha Sun Young, the Swordmasters, magic researchers, and even the spirits. They seemed to be getting along well, so I was relieved. Can you show Nunim? Sial Yungyeon Nunim appeared on the screen as I finished my words. She still had her pale blonde hair, resembling a snowy mountain in the sunset, and she was wielding her sword at the forefront of the battlefield. As always, she was beautiful and radiant. My lord, are you okay? I'm okay, just dispose of all the bodies. Nunim, who flicked the last bit of blood in the tip of her sword, turned her back quietly after putting an end to the battlefield. But for some reason, there was no emotion in that expression. Her eyes were empty. Her previously perfect doll-like appearance looked artificial because of those soulless eyes. If she just stood still, those who saw her would think she is a really well-made, pretty mannequin. There were also a few dark circles around her eyes, something which shouldn't be possible for someone once they reach the height Nunim had reached. So why? My lord, please rest now. It's already been 6 months. No matter how strong you are, it can be really dangerous. Shinhaijai appeared and said to Nunim, half screaming. 6 months, that much time had passed. Well, if I die, that will be my destiny. Lord, please don't say things like that. It was my misunderstanding that she seemed to be living well. Nunim wasn't living properly because she couldn't forget me. I tried to rack my brain for a method to ease her pain, but I couldn't find anything. After all, I will be stuck in this situation for a long time. Siadam, would you like to see those from another world? Yes, please. The screen flickered and showed a huge spiral world. It was the world of Arash, where you have to climb through stages while being broadcasted to the constellations. Somehow, the 4 people I had helped appeared on the screen. They were holding a certain trophy. It seems like they finally cleared all the 50 stages. Make your wish, human. Wish is to bring back the human world, just like before, back to those days when we lived in peace. You could wish to be a constellation or become powerful to rule over all humans. Are you really going to give up those for that wish? Yes, because that has always been our goal. Alright then, I'll return your world to how it used to be. Click. The screen ended with the world breaking. They finally achieved their wish. Those guys were stupid at first, but seems like they pulled through. Next, the Island of Dreams appeared. Marilyn and Saraline, they used to be close friends, but now, as sisters, they were preparing for war between the islands by developing elemental skills. Is it because of their outstanding talent they were able to block any attack from any other island? An impeccable heavenly fortress that does not allow any invasion. That was the Island of Dreams. Next world was the Murim. Bikso Hwi, who became the protagonist of that place, had only one goal: to remain in the world and exterminate all the demons which were plunging the world into chaos. She had more willpower than any other protagonist I had met, even more than me. She was the first and last woman to reject the fate of the protagonist. Had that woman been in my place, things might have been a lot different from now. In front of Bikso Hwi, a huge demon with red menacing horns which were taller than Mount Tai, wider than the sea, and hotter than lava, had fallen. It was the archdemon Ragresian. Beak-so-hwi, we did it, we defeated the last demon. Yeah. The sword in Beak-so-hy's right hand began to chatter. The sword's name was Lyinghin. He was a mascot in charge of cuteness and a guide who soothed Beak-so-hy's heart. It was an honor to be able to fight alongside you, Lyinghin. Thank you for all your hard work. What are you going to do now? Now, Beak-so-hwi looked at the distant mountain as if thinking of someone. I should go to the world, that man said. I can't stay in this world now. Finally, the screen changed again and I was able to see another world. At that moment, realization dawned at me. I really had traveled through many worlds and made many connections along my journey. The screen showed Malia, who climbed the tutorial tower again to find me, Yarina, who became a full-fledged empress in the muscle world, and Elaine, who succeeded in saving the world as an archmage. However, they were people who I was no longer able to meet. I will just remember them in my heart. At that moment, the screen blurred together with some static sound. Damn, you are too far away, my voice can no longer reach you. Riene, you've been through a lot. Riene's voice gradually faded away. I felt like something was clogging my throat and a lump of something was suffocating my heart. However, I still tried to smile. So you should rest now. Thank you, Siadam. With those last words, even Riene's voice disappeared. I found myself in a place where nothing was left. Even the constellations were moving further and further away from me. The space had turned black and no light could be seen anymore. I closed my eyes. Because there was nothing to see, the sense of sight was not important. I closed both my ears. Because there was nothing to hear, the sense of hearing was no longer necessary. And I decided to constantly repeat my thoughts. It was because I don't want to forget about my hometown in case someday all the probability accumulated in my body disappears, and I am able to return. Haha, by that time it must be too late to go back. In a place where time, space, and even stories do not exist, I alone recalled happy memories that I can't get back to. That's how I fell into my own world. Protagonists are murdered by me. Thank you for loving. Protagonists are murdered by me. Hi. When I opened my eyes to the loud roar, I could see the space was being torn. Due to some pure white pillar, the empty space was collapsing. The darkness dispersed into fragments and they all became a constellation and began to illuminate this empty space. And there, a jet black hair pushed through. Professor Araceli, I mumbled. And with a beaming smile, she finally opened the space enough for her body to push through. I told you, didn't I? That's high. As Araceli stepped her foot into the air, a series of shimmering fragments of space formed under her feet to connect to me. With each step she took, waves of light spread out and she reached out to me with an elegant gait. Wherever you are. Then she smiled brightly. I am going to find you. At that, I felt my expression changing between absurdity and happiness, and when I held her hand which she stretched out to me, the world suddenly turned brighter. The constellations that disappeared had returned to my side again. The twinkling stars in the distance were also calling me again. You know, Professor, there are so many worlds in this universe, and there are many places where stories don't exist. I didn't know that. From now on, we will travel to such places together. We will buy and eat skewers on the street to our heart's content. Sometimes eat buffet-style meals, sometimes roll around in the mud like a beggar, sometimes become rulers and rule an empire. We will do all that until we erase all the probability inside you. And shortly after, someone else walked in from the broken space. With her silver hair that sparkled even more than the constellations, Empress Sahar walked gracefully and said, and maybe one day you can go back to your hometown. Araceli and Empress Sahar looked at the horizon of the constellations we were about to depart to and said so. Now, you have a lot of time to spend with us, don't you? I smiled at that question. Epilogue. 6 months had passed since UC Autumn disappeared along with the Hell Gate, and as per the regulation, if a hunter does not return for 6 months from beyond dungeons or rifts, they would be considered as dead. So naturally, UC Autumn was presumed dead. In early summer, it was unusual for any rain showers to occur. However, this summer, water was pouring without stopping from the sky. In memory of UC Autumn, the hero who saved the world. Was it a coincidence that it rains on this sad day, or was it due to the flow of the story? UC Autumn left his name as the greatest superhuman in history. His funeral was to be held in a needlessly grandiose manner. Thousands of people and world-famous giants gathered, and it was going to be broadcast in real time to countries around the world. However, Yekaterina did not want that at all. She just wanted to escape from any pretentiousness and grieve quietly. You should use an umbrella. Yekaterina placed a long umbrella over Taylor's head, who was standing in the rain while staring blankly at UC Autumn's tombstone. 2020 to 2054. UC Autumn. When I die, put the rice cake soup on the altar. On the tombstone was written the joke that UC Autumn had always said. It was none other than Taylor who had suggested it. Back when they still fought together every day on the battlefield, UC Autumn had once made a joke that if they were to die, they should write a nice quote on their tombstones. I wish I could write something similar to Einstein's sayings. Einstein. Yeah, only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile. Do you know this? I know, but are you going to copy it and use it as it is? Of course not. I'll change it a little. UC Autumn laughed. Only the life lived for myself is a life worthwhile. What is that you look like a bad guy? I mean, why should I live my life for others? I am going to starve to death right now. That's true. Taylor and UC Autumn laughed raucously after sharing such a joke. Thinking about that moment, Taylor bit her lips tightly. How good it would have been if he just lived selfishly until the end. Contrary to the belief he hugged tight on his early days, UC Autumn chose to be annihilated together with Hell Gate. How he did it and what he was thinking was still unknown to anyone. Taylor 9 stood there blankly for a while. It was hard to even stand still, but she felt that if she just turned away from this place, she thought her heart would break again. Days passed as Taylor kept standing in front of the tombstone. With each passing day, less and less people came to the tombstone. Even less were those who stood there for days like her. How about using an umbrella? There was an albino who was saying the same thing a few days ago. Taylor answered without turning his head. Seol Youngyeon, who gave her an umbrella, didn't expect her to look at her either and simply looked at the grumpy picture of UC Autumn on top of the tombstone. The two stood silently and stared at the tombstone for a long time, and it was Taylor who broke the silence first. Do you think you will ever be able to forget that motherfucker? Seol Youngyeon thought for a while without saying a word and then shook her head. No, if I had even the slightest feeling to be able to do that, I wouldn't have stepped down from my position. On the same day that UC Autumn was presumed dead, Seol Youngyeon stepped down from her position as Murim Lord. After all, being a Murim Lord was something she had done for the sole purpose of helping UC Autumn. So, without him, why should she still stand there? From now on, how are you going to live? Well, I don't even know what it means to live anymore. Me too, yes, I still don't understand. I want to be a little happier. I want to live a good life, but he. Taylor sobbed and Seol Youngyeon patted her shaking shoulders. After a really long time, Taylor was able to raise her head again. Seol Youngyeon silently waited for her. Now it's over. Did you get it all out? Taylor shook her head. She wasn't able to. Her heart was still breaking. Probably it wouldn't even heal for the rest of her life. However, for now, for the very least, she would be able to take one step forward. Taylor turned back and smiled towards Seol Youngyeon, trying to assure her that she's fine. However, a moment later, her facade crumbled as someone entered her view. It was a woman with sparkling golden hair and golden eyes that looked like they were dripping honey. And even though she was wearing a black suit, a sign that she was mourning, she was undoubtedly a woman with a golden brilliance shining all over her body. Renee. The next action that Taylor did as soon as she realized who the woman was purely came out from her instinct. She grabbed Renee by the neck and she, too, had her sad eyes down. You are you Renee? Oh my god, that motherfucker is right. Long time no see, Taylor. How are you? Let's talk about this. Taylor came to his senses and stepped back. Seol Youngyeon, who came running behind her, also looked at Renee with her bewildered eyes. She rarely saw UC Autumn with his childhood friends except Taylor, but the woman with golden hairs who was standing in front of her right now looked exactly like Renee she had seen in a photograph UC Autumn had shown her that one time. How the hell are you alive? You are too much. Is that really something you have to say to a friend who you haven't seen in a long time? Answer quickly. As she shouted, a small shock wave spread around her. Riene sighed and spoke mournfully. Hasn't UC Autumn told you anything? Then did that bastard really break into the Hell Gate to save you? Yes. Then what happened to that bastard? He didn't die. At Riene's words, not only Taylor, but also Xiao Yungyun's eyes shook wildly. He isn't dead. What did that mean? What are you talking about? Explain it so I can understand, please. After destroying Hell Gate, UC Autumn had two options. Will you watch the world perish because of you, or will you disappear from this world? And UC Autumn chose to disappear. He will be floating around in the blanks of the story that even Riene was not aware of. Which means he didn't die. However, he suffered something worse than death. Riene's words destroyed all the hope Taylor and Xiao Yungyun had felt seconds earlier. Taylor eventually fell to the floor. Then can you find his whereabouts? I am currently looking for him, but it's not that simple. Is there really no way? Even if there is, it is impossible for UC Autumn to come back, Riene answered with a gloomy and sunken face. Is that so? I am sorry. You must be sad too. Sorry for showing an ugly side like this. No, it's fine. Taylor turned and disappeared with her shoulders drooped. Riene followed her receding figure with sad eyes. Xiao Yungyun bowed her head to Riene and passed by her shoulder. If there is a way to find him. Wing. She disappeared into the wind and rain, leaving her last words. Please tell me too. Everyone is leaving. There was only one person left in the funeral home, Riene. Riene's day begins with waking up in the morning and opening the window so the sunlight could pour into her room. After staring at the dazzling sky for a moment, she pours a cup of hot Americano and combs her frizzy hair. Once she is presentable enough, she heads straight to her studio and opens her laptop. The leftovers of whatever she was editing yesterday stands before her eyes. Is this also serialization suspended? In this world, there were a loot of protagonists, and something very special was happening to them. As someone had taken on all of their probability, most of them, who no longer needed probability, were giving up on being the protagonist. Which means, in those countless worlds, the existence of the protagonist was no longer needed. That was a positive phenomenon, and it was good to say that Riene's job was already finished. Still, Riene sipped on her coffee and looked at her laptop. Maybe it was because she had already been doing it for 9 years, it was hard to suddenly stop doing it. 9 years ago, in 2043, Riene Ju was sucked into the supergiant rift and died. But that day, Riene did not die, because Earthlings didn't know that the supergiant rift was none other than the gate leading to the Hell Gate. She was able to survive to some extent inside the Hell Gate. Even in the midst of her body rotting, she had persevered with her unbreakable spirit. Then, the person who reached out to her was none other than the Will of Hell Gate. The Will of Hell Gate, which Riene jokingly called the boss, was very curious about Riene's existence and suggests that she join her in his plan. Riene accepted because she had to live for now, and she felt her head light up when she heard of his future plans. And what happened? By chance, UC Autumn came to Hell Gate 2 years later. His lifespan was at the limit. It was then that Riene decided. He had lived his entire life unhappy and had no choice but to die unhappily. Let's make the man she loved the most the happiest person in the whole universe. Even if ruin awaits at the end, it would be better if he could enjoy a good life before dying rather than to die just like that. Riene interesting. Hell Gate's Will was slowly acquiring the human language from Riene. He was still clumsy and couldn't even make his own figure properly, but it was enough for him to communicate. I like that man too, just like you. Some time has passed since then. Perhaps the story you know has unfolded. F-rank Hunter UC Autumn wins with special performance. From the point in time when he was chosen as protagonist, his story was already being written like a novel. It wasn't bad in Riene's point of view because UC Autumn had gained a loving bond and trusted colleague. She had also allowed him to travel around countless worlds, make him see and hear many things. For the first time in his life, he found happiness and he was able to laugh. Riene liked it. Even if she couldn't be with him, she was still satisfied looking at him being happy like that. Riene, who suddenly remembered the boss, put down her coffee and got up. Although the boss's goal was to destroy and unify all the worlds, she and the man she loved could be happy because of him. In a way, it can be said that the boss was their benefactor. As Riene opened the door to the bedroom where the boss was sleeping, something squirmed inside. Riene, have you lost your form already? Yeah, it's become a hideous mess, so please don't look at me. I don't like something ugly either, so I won't look for long. Haha, you are really. The boss voice still resembled Yu Xiaodam's, but since he couldn't keep his figure anymore, he simply hid from Riene under the blanket. Can't you just let go of everything? Why are you so obsessed with that figure? I have one last thing to do. No one else could do it except me. Are you trying to stabilize Hell Gate? Haha, yeah. Hell Gate was still unfinished. Even the sun in the sky was nothing more than an imitation. On top of it, there were no natural phenomena nor no physics laws. So Yu Xiaodam's sacrifice was necessary. Do you also think I'm wrong? It's not a matter of wrong or right in my opinion. Humans are inherently selfish after all. I am not human, I just do it for me. That makes you human. What? The boss, who was hiding under the blanket, popped out slightly, turning only his eyes and looking at Riene. You don't need anything else to be human. If you act selfishly just for yourself and for the things you love, that means you have become a human being. Right. Yes, you are a wonderful human being. Many people were already born in Hell Gate and were walking around. They all have a will of their own, although they don't even realize that the world they were living in was a created one, not a natural one. Riene, what will happen to me now? Well, don't you know already you will die? That's really too much. Riene looked out of her window. It's a really weird feeling. Since Hell Gate could no longer absorb any world, the details of the Hell Gate will not be improved, but for some reason, that sun feels real. Riene, please speak. If I disappear, you too will return to your world. There is no hope here now. If my will is extinguished, this world may no longer be able to endure and it will degenerate again. An unfinished world. A world without any story. There is no way such a world could exist without the will. With Yu Xiaodam, the protagonist of all worlds, leaving this world will soon crumble. Yes, I think so too. I am very sorry for everything I did to you till now. Did I overdo it? It's fine, but the salary here is too low. Sorry. At that moment, Riene felt a certain aura surrounding her own body. Realizing its true nature, a road that connects this world to another world, she had goosebumps all over her body. Until now, it was the ability that she could only use by borrowing the boss's hand. It was the key to dimensional movement. However, it was now possible to do it by herself. This is. It's your severance pay. Even if I don't have money, at least I can do this for you. Thank you. Riene said so sincerely and lowered her head. The boss coughed loudly and then he laughed. Well then, I hope you're happy, Riene. With those last words, the blanket slid down. The shape of the boss had completely disappeared, and as the will that maintained this world disappeared, the world would soon follow. The death of this world was inevitable. Riene had a gut feeling that it was time for her to return, but before that, she still needs to take something from her workroom. It was her laptop. The laptop not only contained the stories of countless worlds, it was also the link that allowed her to always be with Yu Xiaodam. After all, through this laptop, she always watched Yu Xiaodam, feeling his joys and sorrows. I can't see you anymore. With that in mind, Riene unintentionally opened her laptop. Hi. To her surprise, she found a strange text floating on the laptop screen. With a trembling hand, she moved the mouse and clicked on it. Then the text was changed. ROL. She wondered what the words were, and as soon as she knew the meaning behind the words, she typed her answer. She couldn't help but instinctively know who the sender was. Yu Xiaodam. Then a reply came immediately. Yes. Next. I am doing being well. After a moment of speechlessness, she wrote and sent a message as long as she could. She's still doing well though. Her boss fired her and now she can live freely. However, read. HELLO. Can't read it properly. She got a reply saying he couldn't read it properly. Just as it was difficult for her to read the words of Yu Xiaodam, it seems like he also had difficulty reading the message she sent. There's only one reason for that. He's too far away. To be honest, it didn't make sense. Renee's laptop contains all the world, and if Yu Xiaodam was in one of those worlds, there is no way that Renee would not know and the conversation would not be cut off like this. But if there is another world that I do not know about, if the place where Yu Xiaodam left is not a blank space in the story, but a place where new stories are being written, Yu Xiaodam is still alive. In other words, they could meet again. Feeling her heart pounding at that fact, Renee concentrated her mind on the traces of the message as much as possible. She doesn't know what Yu Xiaodam did, but delivering a message to her would probably be very hard. Perhaps he must have used most of the lifespan he had earned. Therefore, she couldn't waste this opportunity. Renee showed a superhuman concentration and chased Yu Xiaodam's traces. However, she found nothing. But at that moment, she felt something tugging her heart. To put it in a picture, it was as if a butterfly was leading her into a dark road. I can go. On the laptop, the last message comes. Let's meet again someday. All together. Finally, communication with Yu D. Xiaodam was cut off, but the butterfly's path was already clearly engraved on Renee's golden eyes. It would never be gone, ever. I have to leave right now. Renee, who was in a hurry, suddenly remembered the people left on Earth. In addition to herself, there were countless others who wanted to find Yu Xiaodam. And now, thanks to the power given by the boss, it would be possible to travel with a few people. Renee, who was about to slam the office door with that thought, saw a strange sight. What? With the will of Hellgate's death, the world should have originally collapsed. However, for some reason, everything was still the same. Oh, it's raining. What the meteorological agency didn't have such a forecast. Should I go to the convenience store and buy an umbrella? People on the street were startled by the sudden rain and started running around. Renee also had no choice but to panic, because the rain showers in this world would only fall when the boss wants it. An imperfect world, a world that would have remained unfinished forever if a being with a will did not refine it. Such a world had now become a completed world. No way. Renee ran out into the street and looked over people's heads. There, she could no longer see the protagonist hashtag. At the scene, Renee realized that the world no longer needed the will of Hellgate. This completed world, which doesn't need a protagonist, becomes completed only because everyone is the protagonist. The world that the boss wanted was only completed after the boss left. Back in her office, she sat at her desk and turned on her laptop. Now she will never come back to this world again, but at least if this world had become real. Shouldn't she let people know that there were people who worked to make this world? Renee checked the date of this other world where hunters, monsters, dungeons, superpowers, great wars, dungeons, cracks, and gates do not exist. Earth, South Korea. November 27, 2020. 12:30 p.m. She uploaded someone's story to her laptop. She really didn't know who would see it, however, she didn't care. The protagonists are murdered by me. Upload. Renee pressed the enter before draping her pink coat over her shoulders and ran out of her office. Then, she looked up. After looking at the sky for a long time, she politely bowed her head and said to those who might be watching her right now, "Thank you for loving Protagonists are murdered by me until now." Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like the video. Have a suggestion? Let me know in the comments.